Picking back up on trade or stay, we have a few other names to get to. Kind of picking up on what is their value, can they stay on the floor, and how much return could they get back. Zion Williamson, we talked about the Pelicans earlier in the show, fired Willie Green, was 2-10 at the time. James Borrego steps in, and they haven't really had any big changes since Borrego has stepped in. Besides, Derek Queen is starting, but from a wins-losses perspective, they're still losing by double-digit points. They're now 2-12, and Zion is on the sidelines again. Zion is very intriguing for a bunch of different reasons. Number one, there was an excitement coming into the year because it felt like he transformed his body, and we talked about that all offseason. Could this be the year that he gets it together? The preseason, he looked well. I thought he would be one of the guys leading the league in steals because he was moving so swiftly on his feet, light on his feet. We saw some 360 dunks. And we start the year, they're losing games, and before you know it, I think 5 or 6 games into the season, Zion Williamson hasn't played since. And they don't have their first-round pick again. It's hard to flip Zion Williamson because I don't know too many teams that are going to fully invest in a Zion Williamson trade. And if they do, please believe you're going to get very limited assets in return. And I don't know the method to get Zion on the floor, which is something we talked about on Numbers on the Board. You've done the load management. You've done the body transformation. He's took extensive time off. We've seen him miss practically entire seasons, right, on multiple occasions. And at this point, I just don't know what to do. And that was more so what I was saying earlier in the show about the Pelicans. Because the lack of value that Zion has, I think it affects the other pieces on your team. Because Zion doesn't have that much value, I think you may have to look at the idea of trading Trae Murphy III. I think you may have to look at the idea of trading Herb Jones. I think some of those things have to be on the table because the other option is sitting around hoping that Zion can put some games together and get over the hump and just kind of wait and wait and wait. But they say doing the same things and wishing for different results is insanity. And, you brought in 2 rookies in Jeremiah Fears and Derek Queen, and maybe you fully commit to those guys. But yeah, from the Pelicans perspective, I think all signs may lead to stay just because you don't have any other option on a trade market right now. I try to sit around and think of teams that would maybe willing to trade for Zion, and I don't even think any of those make sense. I remember Detroit was a team over the summer that teams talked about, but that was with the idea of Zion getting in shape and looking the best. We've seen him from a physique standpoint since he's came into the NBA. But now with the new added injury, hamstring injury, really no timetable, and with the way that the Pistons are playing, I don't think they shake things up to incorporate Zion. And we talked about Ja Morant and having a specific type of play style that you can't just drop into a 4-man group or a 5-man group and getting acclimated fast. Zion is a guy that you have to think about with spacing. You got to think about him playing off of your best player. It's a lot of different things that come in with the acquisition of a guy like Zion Williamson, and plus the price tag that you're going to pay, which I think is a bottom line issue that we're dealing with right now in the NBA around the league. A lot of the guys that we're talking about being available, the price point to acquire them is astronomical in a day and age where we have to worry about aprons. First apron, second apron. You know what I mean? Trying to aggregate contracts and make them match and losing the right to be able to do some of that because you're a second apron team. And, trying to bring in 45, 50, 55, $60 million in a trade, it's just become too difficult for teams. So a lot of that points to a guy like Zion Williamson ultimately staying. And again, I just feel for the Pelicans fan base right now, because a lot of the moves that they've made has just been poor management. And to be honest with you, nothing they've done gives anybody hope to kind of, be optimistic about what's going over there. Continuing with the theme of injuries and big contracts and play styles, LaMelo Ball and the Charlotte Hornets. LaMelo Ball is a guy that when he's on the floor, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to tune into the Charlotte Hornets. He's exciting to me. I love his game. I think there are things that he, needs to work on. And we want to see some of those things improve, sooner than later, because he's not this young, up-and-coming player anymore. This is a solidified guy. And the excitement that we've gotten off of the early seasons has us now wanting to see more of LaMelo Ball, not only on a regular season basis, but we also want to see him play in some of those high-level instances. We want to see play-in games. We want to see a playoff series. We want to see Game 6, Game 7, and what he's capable of. We want to see if he can drag a team, through a series and prevail them or whatnot. But again, like Zion, like Ja, like Anthony Davis, this is a guy that constantly is losing games due to injuries. And with the draft class that the Charlotte Hornets just brought in recently, the performance of Nipple, some of the upside with Brandon Miller, who is now a guy that I think is kind of taking on some of that injury bug out there in Charlotte. How much longer does Charlotte commit their team to the health of LaMelo Ball? And even this year, he's missed time as well. And, you have to consider it. I like the idea of LaMelo Ball being with this group. Again, some of the games that we've seen with him and Nipple and these young guys, they're exciting. They're exciting. But I also understand that cloud of depending on somebody year in and year out to finally get over that injury hump or hurdle and to be able to be on the floor for majority of the games. And we've seen a lot of organizations invest in that and not get the return of their investment. And that kind of leads me to the trade pathway for LaMelo Ball and the Charlotte Hornets. But because there is a lack of value, because they're still not in a rush to do anything, this team is still relatively young, they can afford to be a little bit more patient, in my opinion, versus a New Orleans Pelicans type team, because the Hornets have their draft picks, because the youth is intriguing, because they haven't made too many bold mistakes. I like the idea of LaMelo stay, continue to invest in this young group, continue to hit on these draft picks, and give this team a little bit more time to gel. Give Brandon Miller. I'm so sorry, Brandon Miller. Give Brandon Miller a little time to get together as well, so we can see him, LaMelo, and Nipple on the floor together. You might have something super intriguing. There was a time, I keep trying to remind fans, where Steph Curry was in the same shoes as a LaMelo Ball with these, reoccurring ankle injuries. And I always think about, what if the Warriors would have gave up on him? And they did try. In the Andrew Bogut trade, I think it was Steph Curry and not Monte Ellis, but ultimately the Bucks chose to fight to get Monte Ellis, and the rest is history there. But there are situations in careers where, a guy is injury riddled and there's some nagging issues and it feels like, man, he can never get over it. But once he does, not saying that LaMelo Ball is Steph Curry, but there's some hope there and some reason to be optimistic. Our next guy, Trae Young, we talked about earlier. The Atlanta Hawks have been playing some of their best basketball of the season, unfortunately without Trae Young. And there's been a big discussion, are the Atlanta Hawks better without Trae Young? I will say they have been better. Over the last week or so, there is nobody in the world that can deny the fact that the Hawks have been better. But what I will say is the Hawks set themselves up to be better. Not to take anything away from Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and all of the guys who have chipped in on this current winning streak that they have and kind of turn the season around. But I do think we got to cut some slack to Trae Young. I do believe that this team had a lot to gel with, right? There was a new team with a bunch of offseason acquisitions to get acquainted together. And sometimes the start to that is bumpy. We even seen that happen in Orlando. And I think the excitement of something new, obviously the excitement of having some success, some instant success, makes the conversation a little bit more appealing to people. But I don't want to jump the gun too soon and just say that the Hawks are better without Trae Young, move on from Trae Young immediately. Because number one, like some of these other names that we've already mentioned, I don't know what the market for Trae Young looks like. They didn't extend him, so you don't have to worry about the money just yet. And I think the Hawks have Trae Young in a position to where they can get him to commit to whatever it is that they want him to do, right? Seeing the team have success without you can be humbling. It can check your ego. And again, he has an extension that he wants. Trae Young, from every, interview I see, loves Atlanta, wants to be in Atlanta. He's embraced the winning streak. I think this is an immediate stay, and I want to see both sides get together and ultimately have the success with Trae, because in the playoffs, you will need a dynamic guard like Trae Young to lean on in a half-court offense, and he'll be there. So, Trae Young, stay.